Thank you, Achilles. I'm afraid it's now time for the old people. So we are, for better, better for worse, now at the grown-ups table. But speaking about issues that, of course, are of paramount importance to young people and to all of us. And in that way, I'd like to start with a little thought experiment. Imagine if you were one of these students, or even younger, and you're looking at the introduction of AI into the classroom, into the education space. As a student of whatever age, what would each of you see as the most interesting or exciting prospect of AI? What would you do knowing that you had AI tools at your hands as a student? And we'll just go down. So Irina, if we could start with you.
Well, I think it's an interesting question to put to the young people, because we have our own biases and histories and personal experiences. I think I would be mesmerized by it. I would just dive into it, definitely. I would explore all the different dimensions of it. But with my experience now, I will be just a little cautious.
We're going to get to the fears.
Right. I will just be a little cautious, as I said, with my experience, but otherwise, I think it's just fantastic.
All right.
Well, I was born and the internet was almost already there, and since I was an elementary school student, I had internet, and that was not a big wonder for me. For others, for sure. While for me, it has been a big change when I had internet on my phone, the smartphone idea and the social network, etc. So I think that if you get that tools when you are a very young student, a primary school student, you will be, yes, dazzled, but immediately you will adapt. That will be your reality. That will be your life. So I think that, in fact, what will happen is that it will become the normal. It will not be such something like I feel today as something that is incredible, what we can do now with AI. And so it will become a normal thing. However, as the systems and the AI in general is evolving so fast, I think someone will, as a student, in changing my levels of studying, primary and middle and high school, it will be completely different. So I think the acceleration will be great, and I will have to learn all the time anyway the new ways of using AI, which will change over time very quickly.
Okay, Royal, you're a student now.
Yeah,
what would you do?
Not a theoretical question. I have an 18-year-old son who started university this year. And this summer, I was reminded how much of a democratizing technology AI is, because he was working in a lab and counting some things on a radiology screen. It was just used for his labor. He was literally counting. And with some of these AI models, he and I worked together. And he wrote a proof of concept to use AI to count the things for him. And it was amazing how quickly he could get this to work. So to your point about just jumping in, it's actually remarkably accessible and usable. And I would say kind of exciting time to be a student, frankly.
And Jae-ho.
Yeah. I'm Jae Young, the president of newly founded in Korea university that is named Tae University. And the AI is very useful in the 21st century. 20th century education is kind of a mass education. It is good for the mass production and mass consumption. So we just specialize our majors and then teach students just like explicit knowledge, already common knowledge to everybody. But in the 21st century, thanks to the AI introduction, we are changing our whole education system. We don't need to memorize, rote memorization and everything, and we just think about more creative way and critical way or something like that. In Korea, from this fall, and Ministry of Education is planning to produce the digital textbook. It is just used for every elementary school and the junior high and high school students. They just receive the PC and the that kind of programs, and every contents of the text is inside of it. And then it is customized education. And if you may just have some questions and then AI answer directly. As you know, the Georgia Tech Institute, they have the Jill Watson AI just a supported just a TA. And in the computer science, the courses, if students have some questions and then AI answer directly. So from now on, not a mass education, but individually customized education is possible in the 21st century. So we have to change the whole education system and pedagogy and paradigm. So we have to develop this kind of new systems of education in the future.
So, Royal, like you, I also have an 18-year-old who just started college, and I think she would be delighted to hand over all of her chem calculations to AI, but unfortunately it's forced to use a very rudimentary calculator. But I thought I'd share the reactions of my kids to AI. My 16-year-old is applying to college and thinks it's incredibly unfair that he's laboring on his college essays, which he considers to be a point of pride, fearing that many other students are frankly going to have their essays written for them by AI tools, and that he'll be at some kind of a disadvantage. And my 14-year-old likes to use ChatGPT and other similar tools, basically as a form of procrastination, asking them absurd questions and just seeing if he can confuse the computer mind. So I'd like to just turn this question to another angle and ask you each, as a parent, or a prospective parent if you're not one, what would you be most fearful or worried about with regard to how AI might influence, impact your child's education? Irina, we'll start again with you.
Well, I think we have to start, and this is always, I have been thinking about kids going to school. It is not just to get knowledge, right? Information, knowledge is everywhere. Education is a socializing. Education is, how to say it, a deeply human act, an act of social interaction. And I would be afraid of my children or my grandchildren, that I have 5 of them, will lose this type of human interaction because this is where values are being instilled into children, formed, educated. Some of the other very important, I would say, once again, values like empathy, teamwork, friendships, interaction, simple things seems to be, but this is what schooling is giving. So I would be very much worried that if we look strictly AI as, and I totally agree that it's really changing the way we personalize. There are so many advantages, maybe we will speak about that, but we should not overlook also the other side of it.
Yeah, it's interesting when, Jeho, you talk about ways in which education become personalized. One of the things people might worry about is, does this replace teachers? Is each child going to be, or each student, in a kind of one-on-one relationship with a computer mind, as opposed to with a human who's creating a kind of shared experience? But we'll go on to Brando.
Yeah, well, I'm not a parent, but I'm an uncle of 2 school boys that are in middle school and high school. So they are already using instruments of AI. And as I said in the previous answer, for them is like natural because they are very young and it's a natural thing. It's not a big wonder, and they are eager to use these instruments. However, I think it was correct for us as European Parliament to propose and in fact modify the original proposal of the European Commission that was presented to us and to the governments of the EU to put children development, so mental and physical, into the area that is more protected by the regulation, so the so-called high-risk AI systems use cases. So this was something that we thought was necessary because on one end, the instruments can be very well used to increase the learning capability, and in fact, as you were mentioning, the issue of the role of teachers, I think that if well directed, it will help teachers, not substitute them. I'm more optimistic on this sense. But there are risks like around cybersecurity of the systems, the use of data of minors, discrimination risks, the way the systems are trained, if they can have inherent biases. And also, it depends on which place they are used, in which place, because schools are very different. I'm concentrating on schools, obviously. They can be, there can be different compositions of the way teaching happens. The school population can be very different. This could entail different risks that need to be considered in the various phases, from the developers to the actual users of these systems. I think this should be done, and why I'm saying this, why we work on that, because we want to build trust. We want parents, we want relatives, we want school teachers to be sure that they are safe with using systems. We cannot eliminate risks completely, but we can do our best to mitigate all of them. I mentioned a few, but we could mention more.
So it's interesting, I think it was interesting to all of us when we read a few years ago that many of the the heads of the big tech firms did not allow their own children to use smartphones and social media. So it's interesting now to have you, Royal, you work on privacy, safety, and security at Google. What scares you about what AI will bring to your children?
No, it's a great question, and one. And again, I have a 13-year-old, and I'll relay in that context, I think, what I'm concerned about. It's a little different than you might think, but I think it brings together the tensions that we're all managing. And so my fear is that, as we learn as a collective society how to use these technologies well and manage the risk, I think the personalization point is a very good one. My 13-year-old was infected with COVID in the very beginning of the disease and is suffering from long COVID and has not been to school for 3 years. And so he's been home, and we've been trying to figure out how to keep him educated while we try and figure out the disease. He went and met with the teacher just a couple weeks ago as he was thinking about 7th grade and would we be able to do any school. And the teacher talked to him, and he remains at grade level in no small part because of the resources he has online, AI being one element, but just generally. So there is this question of bringing the world along and raising people up while navigating. If he were going to school every day and playing baseball like normal kids, I would say let's work on the limiting of time. As it stands, that's his window to the world. He lives in his bedroom. And so I think this tension of how do we be responsible, but also embrace the technology for those who will benefit from it. So I think it's hard, and you're right, it's smack in my job, but that's my view on it.
Yeah, okay. I just totally agree with Irina Bokova. The socialization is very important in just the education in school. But until very recently, especially in Korea, students stay at school around 10 hours or sometimes 15 hours to learn just standard knowledges and simply just one-way teaching from teacher to students. But there's no some kind of collaboration or project and problem solving and that kind of things. So the AI will support to provide the explicit knowledge to students. So in the school, we can just face-to-face socialization and a lot of other things, just like character building or just like a leadership training, and that kind of thing is more important. My university, just around just half of the teaching is related to and the facilitating discussion sessions and creative just idea creation or something like that. That is related to the knowledge. And the other half is related to the dormitory residing and in the residence, some kind of socialization process is very, very important, just a teaching method. And you know that around 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when the calculator appeared in the, just like engineering school, just professors did not permit to bring the calculator in the examination. But now, it is very common to utilize just a calculator. Just like this, in the AI supported one of the computer science professors in Korea, he told their students, please use ChatGPT in programming. Don't waste your time around 10 hours of the programming, the whole process of the coding and programming. And just think about, use your time in more creative way and raise the questions and leave it to the ChatGPT. So we may utilize how to use ChatGPT or AI so the teachers and professors from now on should develop and design how to teach. In this kind of explicit knowledge, we utilized some kind of, for example, in the university, Coursera and Udemy and that kind of already provided in the video lectures. And then we just simply watch that video lecture. And then in the classroom, just a person to person, they discuss problem solving, and that kind of thing is more important. In Australia, now they don't have any classroom at all. They are building the project workshops instead of classroom. So in a group, they discuss and solve the problems and the issue raising and discussion. That is a new way of education. So I think that is very good for AI support.
Irina.
Just one, because what Professor Young said made me think about another aspect of the impact of the consequences of AI. AI made us look at education systems, and to the extent that I have been very much involved in this with UNESCO, to look what we have done right, what we have not done right, to look at these systems, as you mentioned, do kids need to stay there 10 hours or not, how to make this mix of helping teachers, using also technology with some traditional way of thinking. So this really made us rethink, revamp. But it doesn't mean that we should not support teachers or we should not look at education and schooling as a socializing, right? But it made a bigger impact on us changing the way we have done things.
Just related to the democracy issues, and until now, we think that school is a place to convey knowledge to students in order to survive in the modern world. But from now on, the function of education should be changed into another way. For example, just like discussion or understand diversity or empathy feelings. And so that is the reason why the Taizé University is selecting our students not based on the grade of the high school, but based on their experience as a leader or participating in various occasions of this kind of forum or that kind of things. So the university and the school's function should be changed quite differently in the 21st century.
It's interesting because part of what you say points to one of the tensions and kind of questions of trade-off in education, right? Because you can make something more efficient by allowing AI or any form of technology to do it for you. The trade-off is then that the student doesn't necessarily learn to, through the force of repetition, which we know is boring, but learn to become sort of accustomed to overcoming that boredom and also having that training of doing that kind of repetitive work. You do learn something else through that. And so there's a question of if you outsource all of that to AI, what do you then lose? But I want to go back to actually one thing that Brando, you said, which is that your nephews and nieces, that they find AI to be very natural and normal. And on the one hand, that sounds very good. You know, it's like people say about babies, that they can pick up an iPhone and learn how to swipe within seconds. But on the other side, I wonder, is it good for them to think of AI, something that for us is still, you know, very much kind of echoes of 2001 and HAL and all kinds of, you know, doomsday scenarios. Is it good for them to think of it as natural and normal? Or should they see it with more wonder and really make a distinction between AI and human intelligence? And to that point, how do we teach children to differentiate between human-produced content and computer-produced content? That's a question for all of you.
I can start?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a shared responsibility between culture, media, and regulators, and the families, the institutions in general, because they will not do that by themselves, in my opinion. I think you need to draw some boundaries and put some rules around that, also for them, what should be used and how. Not limiting creativity, but understanding where are risks of losing track of reality, to be honest, because I think that the evolution is still not completely understandable. I was a few days ago with the CEO of OpenAI in a debate, and he made some predictions about the future of the general artificial intelligence. And I mean, is it true? Is it false? I don't know. But I think that we need to be prepared so that we can have a society that is conscious, starting from people that are now in their learning activity. But this needs to be done through various actions. I mentioned one, for example. On the regulatory side, if we manage to bind the companies that, and the systems that are, for example, on the generative AI side, to make the content produced by generative AI recognizable, so watermarked or whatever, it's technically complicated, we know, but that would be important. Also, I give you even a more problematic example, the deepfakes problem. That it's not a new thing, they are already there, but AI can make that more viral, more easy, more problematic for democracy. So we need to find technical solutions and rules so that it's not that people will grow with the idea that there is no difference between reality and fiction, because the risk is there. If everything can be I mean, we could pretend that something that is fake is real, and it's difficult to make the distinction.
So one of the things with kids, and maybe I'll direct this to you, Royal, is that we know that generally speaking, everything that adults do with technology, kids learn to do much better and to get around it, whether it's a block or any other tool of surveillance. They tend to find a way around it, and people are really concerned about things like plagiarism already, right? Where teachers, routinely now use plagiarism detecting software. But AI is going to be smarter than that. Kids are going to be smarter at that. How do we ensure that kids aren't using AI to kind of get around us adult educators?
Yeah, you could say that about any hacker that we worry about in the same context, and many of them are teenagers, so it's not a fiction. Yeah, just to even ground in the first question and then build to that, I think even though technology, in the way we're talking about it, is relatively new, we do now build on a couple decades in the cybersecurity space, in privacy, in kids and family, and the way it works. And so one of the things I think is important, and we released a framework called the Secure AI Framework as a way to try and talk about these things, but let's make sure that in building something new, we don't throw out the lessons, albeit short in this context, but if you take the longer lessons of humans and tools and technology, you know, the important thing is that we're integrating those, whether it's time management, whether it's cybersecurity, whether it's privacy controls. The effort now is to make sure as these come to market, they're at least benefiting from the learnings of the last couple decades. And then we will work together in society as we answer the more specific AI questions. But I think the first step is let's not throw out the lessons of the last couple decades as we chase something brand new. It's this balance again between embracing something new but taking advantage of the controls or responsibility we've learned in the past.
So I want to stay with you, Royal,
Yeah.
for one other, again, kind of question that might veer a little bit into paranoia, or at least caution. Many children now in school in the US, and I imagine around the world, regularly use Google in terms of Chromebooks that are supplied to schools. There are a lot of questions around security and privacy. What is Google finding out about my child? Because we're using all of the Google spreadsheets, Google Docs, et cetera. Last week, there was big news in the publishing world when it was discovered that an AI tool had scraped the work of 183,000 authors. They took 3 of my books and used it as fodder for creating better AI systems. Are is children's data and work going to be used by AI in that kind of way?
It's a great example of the point, so let's sort of elaborate that, you know, we have worked over the past couple decades, particularly in the context of schools and kids and families, to make sure that package of technology is different from the package you would get on the free internet, think of Workspace or Chrome, et cetera. So that, and it's one of the reasons you haven't seen Google. You know, we've been using AI internally for many things for over a decade, but have been cautious about the way we've introduced it into these frontline products, particularly in the context of privacy and children. So again, exactly the right point. Let's not go around the controls and the protections that have been built as we chase something brand new. We need to integrate it gracefully. So it very much my team's body of work.
So Brando and Irina, you've both worked on the kind of government regulation side. You were one of the rapporteurs for the EU Act of June. Here you have someone on the technology side and the business side. What are the things that you most wish that technology companies would do to address any concerns you have around AI and education?
I'll get out my list.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I think it's very important that there is everybody's around the table, kind of a multi-stakeholder approach. I think everybody, we should not, with all my due respect to Google and to the others, we should not leave everything to you.
Too true.
Because it's a societal issue. It's much bigger than that, right? I'm very worried also from that point of view whether AI will bring more equity in education or it will increase the inequity. Whatever we say within countries, universities, broader, and that is why as far as we are fascinated by it, we should still invest a lot, as you said, in teachers, in skills, in human capacity. We have seen with COVID, we thought that we go on the Zoom and everything will be fine. And teachers were lost because they were not supported. They did not know what to do. So now it's a time where we could really look at this. So my first is inequity. And if you look globally, of course, we should know that basic literacy is the foundation of any education. There are so many countries that are lagging behind, and this may even increase. So AI should be used to bridge the inequity and not enlarge it. And the other thing, I think Brando mentioned it, biases. I think we should really look at not to entrench biases into AI. We have seen that with women. I think Amazon stopped using AI for recruitment because they started appointing only men. Women were lost. Women were not there because it was the experience before. So we have to be very careful about all these biases. I mentioned women, but there are other biases that may come here.
So I completely agree with what was just said, but I add more generally, as I am convinced that we need to strengthen the global governance framework for AI. So I'm really supportive, not just of the work we are doing in Europe, but of the international dialogue that is happening in various fora, OECD, G7, G20, UN. It's going on, and that's good. But some of the big tech developers, with the power they have now around the development of these systems, they could abuse of that in what sense? In the sense that some parts of the world have less economic power, less market power than, for example, Europe is trying to say, if you want to operate in our market, which is important for you, you have to follow these rules. I think it's not the same for all the parts of the world, and as today we are talking about children, so I think everyone can agree that these are vulnerable subjects. I think it's important that the big developers, the big tech, they adhere to the principle that even when they are operating where the political power, the economic power is less in terms of discussing or bargaining or imposing to them a rule, they should defend a minimum set of human rights, starting from the children, which is not obvious if no political authority is limiting you in what you can do, for example, on the data that you just mentioned as a topic. Because we are in a world where power sometimes is the only language. We try to make rules and institutions with our democratic systems, but where the imbalance of power is there, we need to have responsibility and ethics. And so this is what I would ask to them.
Yeah, I mean, two thoughts on it. It is a great set of topics. One, but I think even the context, and I'm thrilled to be with you all in this context. Look, 20 years ago, I mean, I had to buy suits to go to these things because I'm an engineer. We have a job to do to protect people. But over those 20 years to this point, there have been more and more forums where we are out talking as technology has become more normalized across many different industries. And I hope our presence and my team, people who are not trained in the governance forums of the globe, there's a way to be at the table while these things are worked out. And I think it can go both ways in the sense of we learn from each other, the hands-on tech experience with the policy work. So I think that's a trend you see. And then I would just also comment on the bias. It's a very good point. And in fact, one of our deepest partnerships with academia, and I think this is where many of these questions, the back and forth with universities on how to train with bias and with many parts of the world involved. These are hard problems to get right so that you're neither paternalistic about it, but you also enable. So I think the academic world actually has a ton to offer us in that area.
Before I get to questions from the audience, I want to ask one last question, switching topics for a moment. Of course, we're all afraid that the machines are going to take away jobs, but perhaps some jobs we might be happy to take away. And one of the reasons behind the increased cost of education, of higher education, particularly in the US, is due to bloated administration. And that's one area where people foresee possible efficiencies coming from the use of AI. So perhaps as the founder of a new university, you can talk a little bit about what you see as the opportunities there.
Yeah. Well, in the long run, in the long-term perspective, I'm very optimistic to utilize the digital technology and AI. Just like atomic energy, if we are using it as an atomic power plant, it is very useful. But if we are using it as a weapon, it is a very serious disaster for the humankind. So we have to, how to utilize it very, just the best way is very important. For example, if we are adopting this kind of new technology by way of AI and the e-book and all digitalized, our cost of running the library is almost 2% of the traditional universities, because we don't need many librarians, we don't need any library buildings, and they just check out the books and the e-journal and e-books directly from the publishers or something like that. So the cost is almost 2%. And also we don't have any just the facilities for campuses and no gyms, because we can utilize library, public library and public gym and health training centers or something like that in the city. So that is some kind of a common economy, and we just share and just use it. So in the digital era, and we can just cost down just the university tuition, and probably just 10% or 20%, that will be enough. And also we recruit our professors from all over the world. They teach in their own home by way of just like remote, just lecturing and facilitating the just classes. So if we just think quite differently, and we can utilize a lot of digital technology and AI in various ways, even in education. And also, but just in another way, we just send our students for 2 years in the different countries, and they just live in the same dormitory with their classmates and experience a lot of things for example, my Teze University case is we are sending our students to Japan, United States, and China and Russia, and each semester. So half of their school years, they are traveling different countries, and they meet people, and just the internship and civil project, a lot of things are doing. So we have to change our mind. Just a simply university and the school is teaching some common knowledges, but experience and socializing is another perspective of the schooling. And also, as I said before, explicit knowledge we can just acquire from AI-aided programs and that kind of things. So education system should be changed quite differently in the 21st century.
Well, thank you all for tolerating my human-generated questions. Before I open it up to the broader audience, are there any students from Teens for Democracy who have questions? I'll start with the young woman up here.
Hi. Okay. Hi. My name is Pavlina. I'm 16 years old, and I have just participated in Teens Athens Democracy Forum. And I have a question. So AI, as we all know, uses a huge amount of data, information, pictures, and articles that already exist in order to predict, in a way, the future, in order to create new things, but always based on the old ones. One of the most important goals for the younger generations, for the students, both for the teenagers and the children, is to make an unbiased and more fair world, a world with no stereotypes. How can you ensure that AI, when used in education, will not promote even further the stereotypes already existing, since AI is totally based on what already exists? Thank you very much.
I think just to build off of the brief exchange, because I think it's a longer example of exactly what we're working on in the responsible AI category, and if you look at our sort of principles, it's exactly the spirit of how we're developing these tools internally. And I do think there's a role, though, for the society at large and academics to help figure out, because you're right, you don't have all the data that you would, what is the perfect set of data? Even to start with, that question is a hard one to answer. And just to give you one sort of slight question or sort of angle that makes it even trickier that might be helpful is to detect abuse, these models need to know abuse. And so there have been efforts along the way where we would strip out certain types of content from the training, and then it was unhelpful when used to try and detect and respond. So there are, this is a multi-leveled problem where it needs to know about the problems to be identified and used, but then you need to protect them with layers as you go up. So again, we're learning as we do this together, but we're trying to be responsible and not rush it into all places and all times as these problems are worked out. I think your points are very well taken.
And maybe I just, if I may just add something, I think it's important to use AI as a library, as a reference, as a repository of human knowledge, generally speaking, in any sense. But think with your own minds. Be ahead of it, not run after it. And I think this is very important, to have this kind of a broader critical mind about what education should be. At the end of the day, it's about choices, right? You have to know how to make your choices in life, in skills, in your professional life, in your personal, civic life, and everything. So be ahead of it, but not behind it.
I know we're out of time, but I do want to let one other student here up in front ask a question.
In the last years, we've heard a lot of things about AI. We've seen it used from the school system against the students, from the students against the school system. Is it better for the school system to adapt with AI, or to change completely to help with the AI problem?
Someone want to take that? Brando?
I think a lot of changes will happen, but still today, if you think how you use computers, internet for schools, I mean, it has already changed a lot. I think the changes will need to be, however, implanted in a basic principle. The fact that we want a school that is bridging gaps, that is giving opportunities for everyone. If we keep our principles clear, then we see how we could use positively AI and what limits to put. And also I want just to comment on the previous one on one point, because you asked about the discriminations and the biases. I think it's important that especially you young people, real young people, because sometimes they tell me I'm a young politician, but it's, yeah, they are the young ones. You need to believe in democracy, which means, and we must not turn our backs to you, we must make it work, but to believe in it means also that you need to believe that we can put rules to that. It's not just that we ask them to do things, but cooperating, discussing, we also say you must do things this way, otherwise you will not do it, because you are creating an excessive damage to our society. Obviously, this is a difficult balance, which means cooperation, dialogue, also bridging principles with technical feasibility, which is not easy, and that's why we need to have a strong discussion with those that develop AI. But the democratic principle is that the rules are made by those that are the actors of society, which are citizens. They must be able to have a say on what is good and what is bad for them, and not just good maybe for profit or for a private interest.
So I'm going to nominate perhaps this panel to be the first panel next year to be integrated with the kids' table. But for now, I want to thank our distinguished panelists, Brando Benifei, Irina Bokova, Rael Hansen, and Jae-ho Yum for their presence here and their fascinating answers. Thank you.